Welcome everyone to the video. Welcome to the channel. I tried to have this video out on Tuesdays, but and or Fridays if I, have enough time to write a script for an additional video or if there's something that I feel needs to get out within that same week. But the reason why I delayed this video an extra day was because of the US Supreme Court's recent ruling against Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for LGBTQ minors. So I want to talk about this. And so I had to come up with a new script for this video, which I did. And I just wanted to make sure, cross my T's, dot my I's. Now, the law was to ban, those that find people who are gay or lesbian or, bisexual who feel that that is wrong and that they need to be converted back to, lack of better words, straight. And so when I saw that, made me stop for a second because this isn't just some random issue. It sits right at the intersection of religion, identity, and how we raise the next generation. Now, for me personally, it brought me right back to how I was raised. Growing up in church, I was taught that people who were gay or lesbian were evil, not misunderstood, not different, just straight up evil. And when you're a kid, you really don't question that. That's how I grew up. You just, okay. And that was it. You're in Sunday school and they tell you this. Okay. Can I go play outside? Can I go, can I go hang out with my friends? What time are we gonna go eat? So, but then it keeps getting, ingrained, the repetitive, it's said repetitively. So what does that do? It shapes how you see people. You start to think they're different. You start to keep your distance, not because you understand anything, but because that's what you were told. And I think that's the part that we don't talk about enough. These beliefs don't just stay ideas, they affect how we treat real people. I wasn't born thinking that way. That's how I was taught. And that really matters. And I was also, when I first heard this, I was also familiar with environments like Christian camps or programs, where people were sent to. Uh, you know, they made it sound like it was a great place to go hang out. We're gonna go camping, we're gonna be out in nature. So they were kind of coerced. Some say I would say, looking back, some were forced. Um, and where the idea was that if someone was living in sin, that you could correct it. Sometimes through pretty intense methods, through accountability and, of course, just direct pressure, trying to push people back into what was considered the right path. And remember, as a kid, you don't really process what that means. You just see it as this is how things are handled. This is how things are done. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that every church or every Christian, you know, that is a part of every church, but those experiences shape how, you understand the world, how I understood the world at that time. And this is where I think people really miss the bigger picture because I don't think it's really about gender. I think gender identity just happens to be the flashpoint because underneath it, it's really about structure. And Christianity, as well as other religions too, but I tend to focus towards Christianity because that's how I grew up, gives people a framework. It answers the big questions for them. What is the truth? What is right or wrong? And what is a human being? And for a long time, gender has been a part of that structure. And so when that gets questioned, it's not just one issue being challenged. It could feel like the whole system is being questioned. And here's where it really gets complicated because beliefs don't just stay beliefs. Over time, they become identity. They become how you view the world. They become your very foundation. So when something challenges that belief later in life, it doesn't feel like a conversation. It feels like a threat, not just an idea, but to who you are. And I think that's why, this conversation gets so intense because people aren't just defending a position, they're defending what they believe is the truth. Now, here's something else that I really think is important to acknowledge, and that's, again, focusing primarily on Christianity because that's where I came from. The Christian church, hasn't been completely static over time. It has adapted. There have been traditions that were absorbed from surrounding cultures, things that became normalized over time, even in more modern situations, things that were once frowned upon, like tattoos. I have tattoos. I just got a tattoo. Um, are now widely accepted among many Christians. I think we know, and we've seen some on, those celebrity pastors, the celebrity, they, have adopted, a lot of what is, you know, currently going on in modern culture. So we know that change can happen. We've seen it. The real question, though, is why do some changes get accepted while others are met with such strong resistance? And I think this is where gender identity becomes different. For a lot of believers, this doesn't feel like a surface level change. It feels like a change to the foundation because now we're talking about identity itself, what it means to be a human. And for many Christians, those answers are all rooted in the Bible. So if that gets reinterpreted, did I say that right? The question becomes, at what point does it stop then? And that's where the fear comes in. Not always hate, not always anger. Sometimes it's just fear of losing that structure. Then you add politics into it, and everything just gets really amplified. It's not just a belief, it becomes a side, it becomes a label, a team. And once that happens, people stop listening because now you're not just disagreeing, you're opposing. And that's when everything breaks down. So, where does that leave us? Because on one side, you have people saying who I am. And on the other side, you have people saying this goes against everything I believe. And both sides feel like they're standing on the truth. So maybe the answer isn't just forcing an agreement. Maybe it's understanding how people got to where they are, understanding that beliefs, especially ones formed early, run very, very deep. And at the same time, recognizing that people just want to live their lives. They just want to be accepted for who they are, and that's it. Maybe the real question isn't who is right. Maybe it's just, how do we live together when our deepest beliefs just don't align? And that's where I'll close the video here. Thank you for watching. Thank you to all the new subscribers. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Um, and definitely, I'm pretty sure we're going to have more conversations on this in the future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.